Good morning and welcome to Arbitrary and Capricious, a podcast where we talk about anything and everything that's happening in the news or just what we want to talk about. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jay.
And we have a lot of fun things to talk about this week. So how are you doing this week, Jay?
I'm doing all right. Went out for some karaoke last night and stayed out a little bit too late. But I got myself some caffeine and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's been a hectic weekend. A bunch of movies and food. It's been a good weekend. But it also seems like we're here because we had our podcast like on Tuesday this last week. So
there's also been a lot of news this weekend.
A lot of things happening. Yeah,
there was a chemical attack in Syria.
Never going to go away.
Yeah, I thought we were done with that, or not done with Syria, but done with chemical weapons. But guess not. So
no, and the funny thing is, I remember when we had that piece originally, we were talking about Syria. You said that you remember in like 2014 or 2012, you saw an article as like the Forgotten War in Syria. Like just recently, I saw an article that said the Forgotten War in Yemen. I was like, oh my god, I forgot we have a war in Yemen also.
Yeah, I mentioned it when I was having lunch with my family yesterday, and they all said, "Wait, what? What's going on in Yemen?"
And let's not even mention the fact that we've been in Africa for a few years now, and that's never really been clarified as to why.
Yeah. Is that like, where is that? Like Mali?
Somewhere. I just remember like at some point 4 soldiers died, and everyone was like, wait, why are we in Africa?
Yeah, that was like for a minute that looked like that was going to be a Benghazi, but
it just disappeared.
We just all kind of moved on again because Trump tweeted something.
Yeah, just wait 10 minutes or something new to talk about.
Exactly. Well, what do you got to talk about this week?
So this week, I definitely want to talk about the Democrats. We're in an election year. It's the midterms, and there are a lot of similarities to this election, to the 2012 election, and to the Tea Party elections. And so I kind of want to analyze that. Can the Democrats actually take back the House and the Senate? And are they something more than just an anti-Trump party? Because we saw how, effective being an anti-Obama party was, but it wasn't very effective at governing. So is this going to be the new norm? We're just going to shift back and forth? Or is there something substantive that we can latch on to? What about you?
Okay. I want to go south of the border. And
you love going south of the border, man. I mean, we just need to have some taco chips out here every morning.
Absolutely. And then I want to go south of that border and several more. I want to go to Brazil.
Okay.
I don't know how much you've been watching the news, but the former president of Brazil, who's also running for president again, was holed up in a union building avoiding arrest for serving a prison term for corruption. So I want to do a little bit more of Corruption Cast, talk about what's going on in Brazil, and see what we can learn from that.
I feel like we could probably do a separate podcast, just call it Corruption in Latin America, and we would never run out of things to talk about.
Yeah, you know what? That's a sad truth.
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably the reason why we have so much I feel like corruption in these countries is why the gangs and the cartels are able to have so much power and control over regions. You know?
Absolutely. When the power structure is corrupt in and of itself, there's no way that it can protect its own people.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that stuff, got any old business?
Yes, absolutely. We've been talking about guns since day one on this podcast, and one of the things that I've harped on over and over again is that under the current Supreme Court case law, I think it's Heller versus D.C., the Second Amendment only protects your right to have a handgun in the home for self-defense. That is what they have interpreted the Second Amendment to mean currently. And everyone argues about what it means, and the NRA say it protects everything, and then everyone else, normal people, they say no, it doesn't. And Massachusetts passed a assault weapon ban, and it was taken to court. And the federal district court, which is the lowest level, they looked at Heller and they said, no, you can do this. State, you can ban assault weapons and large magazines or clips or whatever the hell they're called. I know that NRA people get obsessed about that answer. But
do they really?
They do. If you say the wrong thing, they're like, it's not a clip, it's a magazine. And so, but the court upheld it. They upheld the ban. Now, I assume the NRA or whoever is suing to overturn it probably will take it all the way up to the Supremes if they're allowed to. But I think that the answer we already have is the right answer, and that is that, hey, you can ban assault weapons. They did it in the 90s. Massachusetts do it now, and the Second Amendment only protects your right to a handgun in the home for self-defense. Now, we do still have a pretty conservative court, and they could expand the Second Amendment. That is a possibility. But in the Heller decision, they specifically explained that decision should not be read to undermine reasonable restrictions on gun control that are already in place across this country.
Well, I don't want to get too bogged down in the old news, but let me pose you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So the narrative, as I understand it from the left right now about guns, is that the NRA and those who are opposing restrictions on guns, the Second Amendmenters, they are puppets of NRA money, that if we remove the NRA money going to the politicians, then we wouldn't have this problem. So if that's the truth, then would you not expect the Supreme Court to not be affected by that, since they are not going to be bought by lobbyists?
Well, I think that you're onto something. One of our professors in law school, when he was explaining the difference between a Republican, justice and a Republican congressman, he was saying, the justices are kind of in the center and they're leaning left or right. And then the congressmen, they're out on the wings and they're like on the far left and right. He says they're trying generally to get the right decision. And so that's why they're appointed for life. You can't reduce their pay. They're supposed to look for the truth and justice and follow the Constitution. Do they have their own interpretation, their own leaning? Yes, that's absolutely true. But I do think that the court is probably least susceptible to lobbyists, except for Monsanto and except for Clarence Thomas, because his wife works for Monsanto and he should have recused himself, and that was bullshit. But outside of that, I do think generally the court is probably pretty immune to lobbyist money. I don't know about Gorsuch, because he's already spoken at, I think, Trump Towers and at like a couple of fundraisers or something like that. And so he might just be toting the Trump line since he got his nomination. But I think most of the justices are there and they respect the court too much to make a mockery of it. Well, but at the same time, most of these justices were on the court in 2011 whenever the Heller decision was written, and they expanded the Second Amendment. So, because honestly, I know this. This was really interesting. I heard this actually this last week, is that before 2011, the prior decision interpreting the Second Amendment was 70 years prior to that. Wow. And it just interpreted that a shotgun wouldn't be the type of gun used in a militia, so the state could prohibit that use. A sawed-off shotgun could be prohibited under the Second Amendment. And so it was decided on militia grounds. Isn't that interesting? Because we never talk about that clause.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then we had a 70-year gap. And apparently a lot of people during that gap thought that the right was more of a collective right, that the state couldn't disarm all people, but that you didn't necessarily have an individual right. That shifted in the 70s and the 70s and 80s, and the NRA kind of started getting support. And then all of a sudden, 2011, we have this DC case, and that's where, for the first time, the court says, yeah, you do have an individual right to a gun. So this whole situation we're in right now is just the outcome of shifting culture and the NRA changing its tactic on how it speaks about the Second Amendment.
Do you ever feel like, as lawyers, our job is not so much to interpret the law as it is to explain why the law fits with our culture? Yeah,
or how our culture is affected by the law.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't think about how the courts have forced culture change, and we kind of just walked through it obliviously, but we saw it recently when they overturned the Defense of Marriage Act, right? They shifted the culture. All the states where they had, banned gay marriage, that ended. So, and sometimes that's a good thing for the court to be able to do. Sometimes the court has to look and say, based off of the documents that we're founded on, is this really something that represents us.
Okay, gotcha.
So, anyways, continuing on with the old news. Anything from you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things from last week I want to touch on. First, we briefly mentioned the violence that's ongoing in Gaza. That violence has continued.
They
But
were burning stuff on the border, right? Like tires and stuff to create black smoke, like so they couldn't see it.
There's an ongoing protest by the Palestinians, just sort of about the general situation. They want to return back to their ancestral homelands that are now part of Israel, that they're no longer able to live in or even visit. And the part of those protests is that they've been lighting tire fires and such. But last week we also mentioned that Gaza also shares a border with Egypt, and we touched on how Egypt is also enforcing the blockade, but we weren't sure of the timeline on that. And I just wanted to say that I looked into it, and the short answer is that the Egypt-Gaza border crossing has been closed since about 2007, when Hamas came to power in Gaza. It was opened briefly during the Mohammed Morsi regime after the Egyptians overthrew Mubarak. I think that was 2011.
Yeah.
They had Morsi until about 2013. During that period, the border was open intermittently, but once al-Sisi, the current president, violently overthrew Morsi, the border has been closed permanently, I think partially under pressure from both Israel and the United States.
Yeah.
The short answer, it's been closed since 2007.
Interesting. Well, and with the slight opening, didn't after the Morrissey episode, that wasn't there some type of like an attack from Gaza? I remember they like built tunnels with like concrete and steel that they had been receiving from the UN that was supposed to go to hospitals. Instead, they were building tunnels so they could sneak into Israel and, try and get past the blockade. So,
yeah, that was a big part of the 2014 conflict between Israel and Gaza, where part of the
right, the no-knock bombings, or
part of the justification by Israel was that they were destroying the tunnels used by terrorists, as they deem them, from launching attacks into Israel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, prior to Hamas being voted the political party of Gaza, like they were already labeled terrorist.
Oh yeah,
like, this wasn't like a thing, like a retaliatory thing,
right? And Hamas continues to be considered a terrorist organization by the United States, the EU, pretty much the entire West.
Yeah. Now things were very different with the Palestinian Authority. I mean, there's still conflict, but not the same level as Hamas.
Right. You're absolutely right. The situation in the West Bank it's very much different, where they've taken a much more peaceful approach, and they themselves have tried to distance themselves from Hamas.
Yeah, Gaza's just foobar, man. It's a bad situation, and it's an open air prison. It's bad. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, we could probably spend a whole segment on that. So let me move on.
Yeah, we do need to put Israel and the Middle East back on the map, though, for the future, just because. We haven't talked about what's going on over there since, I think, episode 1.
Yeah, pretty much. But last week, I also made another faux pas. I referred to Swift boats when we were discussing the 2000 election between Bush and Gore. That was the wrong election. Swift boats was 2004 with John Kerry. So my bad, y'all.
This segment has been brought to you by Jay Tucks Out of His Ass.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to touch on the Cambridge Analytica scandal, because Facebook has revised the number of people who were affected by it. And now they're saying that about 87 million people in total had their data turned over to Cambridge Analytica. Wow. They also this week suspended a Canadian data firm who was... they were hired by a number of groups, particularly the Leave campaign for the Brexit referendum. They're paid about $3 million from several different groups to assist in targeting voters in that. And for that referendum. Some people are saying that they're related to Cambridge Analytica. This is all coming from the same whistleblower.
Yeah.
He's saying that people at Cambridge Analytica referred to this Canadian company as their Canadian office. I think they're called AIQ. I didn't write down what that stands for, but then to go back to South America, bringing back reasons to dislike Nicolas Maduro.
Bring it around town.
There we go. A fire in a Venezuelan jail killed 68 people. There was no response from the president, Nicolas Maduro, and in fact, the police sprayed tear gas on family members who had gathered at the prison hoping to hear news about their loved ones.
That's terrible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Nicolas Maduro, he is definitely taking Venezuela down the authoritarian route, right?
Yeah. And he's got a great dictator mustache.
Is as good as John Bolton's?
Oh. It's not quite so walrusy.
Okay.
But it's up there.
Well, hey, before we move on, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you. We've talked about the March for Our Lives and Parkland. Did you see this about Laura Ingraham, who is a Fox News anchor or opinion person or whatever, took over Bill O'Reilly's spot? She's now like off the air and losing sponsorship because she was making fun of I can't remember the kid's name. It's David Hogg, I think is his name. David Hogg's prospects of getting into college because he didn't get into all the ones he applied for.
Yeah.
And so I just don't understand this. Like, why haven't they learned that whenever you do something that's really crossing the line, they attack your advertising? Because this is exactly what happened to Bill O'Reilly. This is why, everyone else on AM radio has to sell gold, because that's the only advertising will work with them. They haven't learned yet. Like, they've been selling gold for 5 years now.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like, I don't know, vitamins, because anyone can make supplements. You put some sawdust and a couple of vitamin B in it, and you're selling supplements.
Exactly.
Hello, Alex Jones. So what do you think? Like, why do they continue to do this?
I don't know. I mean, what you're describing about the advertisers, that's just sort of classic capitalism in this sponsorship-driven celebrity culture. But
it's not really happening the same level on the left as it's happening on the right. Like, I remember there'd be like, oh, we need to boycott so-and-so because, or like the taking a knee. Remember when all that was going down? People were saying we need to boycott the NFL. No one boycotted the NFL. No advertisers left over that I know of.
I think it might just be that the celebrities on the left are more like PR adept. Like the one that comes to mind for me is Kylie Jenner did that Pepsi ad where she was like giving a
Let's
can
save
of Pepsi
the world
to
with
the
the
cops.
Pepsi.
Yeah, and like the backlash against that was just sort of, you don't understand the problem, like go back to taking pictures of your dog. And that's just sort of what happened. And everybody moved on.
Yeah.
While Bill O'Reilly's out, for a while it looked like Sean Hannity was out, but he's clung on. So I don't know.
Well, he's lost his top spot to Rachel Maddow, so I think that has to hurt.
Ooh.
Yeah. I saw that this week that Rachel Maddow had taken the top news spot or top watched anchor spot from Hannity this week or last week. So, he's got to be just pissed. I just imagine, you remember that like clip where like Bill O'Reilly's like flipping out. He's like, "We're doing it live." Yes. I feel like that's how like Hannity must be all the time now because he's just a clown.
I think my favorite Rachel Maddow joke is from 30 Rock when Alec Baldwin says, "Only one of us can have this haircut."
It's true though.
Well, that's everything I've got for old news. You want to get into the Democrats?
Absolutely. I want to talk about the Democrats. And specifically, I want to see, are they more than just anti-Trump, and can they flip the House? It really bothered me that during the 2012, rise of the Tea Party election cycle, when I would argue and talk to people who were Tea Partiers, it wasn't about necessarily good governance or good, policy. It was just Obama
Obama.
sucks. Obama sucks. I hate Obama. I don't want Obama, and he's ruining this country. We need to take it back. Take our country back. That is definitely a Tea Party ideal. And so
populism,
and that's what it kind of feels like. The Democrats are starting to lean that way. We got to take it back from Trump now. And so that especially after our discussion of populism last week, that's concerning. And so where are we at? Is this the new norm? Are we going to shift to a populism type system, or is there some real substance out there? And so I took a look at the House first, and in order for the Democrats to take back the House, get a majority, they have to pick up 24 seats. Okay. Now in the House, this is pretty good for them because there are 61 seats that are at risk, either a toss-up or they're leaning kind of GOP, that the Republicans could lose. Whereas the Democrats only have about 22 seats in jeopardy. Okay. So what's in play here leans towards the Democrats. And there's also two major reasons why a lot of these Republican seats are in danger. And it's because in the 2010 and 2014 midterm elections, these were massive windfall seats for just the anti-Obama sentiment that was going on. So these were seats that ultimately a lot of them voted for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. And they've been red just because of the anti-Obama sentiment. Also, there's been a lot of Republicans that are retiring this year. I think apparently 35 House Republicans have announced to retire this year, or that they're moving to some different type of office. So,
including my district here in Plano, Sam Johnson's retiring.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, it's really happening a lot. And I think that we're seeing kind of the Trump effect on the Republican Party. Some Republicans who maybe have been more moderate or kind of middle of the road or less insane, they're like, we don't want to be associated with this. We're gonna pull out. We're gonna back out of the election. Up in Pennsylvania, I think they've had a couple of people who have won multiple elections up there. They're just not running for re-election because they're like, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be associated with Trump. It's not going to be good. So I think we're seeing the Trump effect a little bit here, and there is a chance for the Democrats to take back the House, even with all the gerrymandering. Now, a big part of that comes from the fact that Pennsylvania just got redistricted, right before this election. Had that not happened, I think that it would have been a lot less likely. So there is a chance to take the House, but the Senate is a little bit more unlikely. It's possible, but unlikely.
Well, before we move on to the Senate, real quick, can you run the numbers by me again? You said that the Democrats, they've got to take 25 to get a majority.
24 seats to take a majority.
24. Okay.
There are only 22 of their seats that are at risk of being lost, whereas there are 61 seats of the Republicans that are at risk of being lost.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So you see, there's a lot more that they can go after, in Republican territory, that might be either a toss-up or just slightly leaning GOP. Gotcha. So they have some room to try and go. Now, I mean, it's possible. We've been talking about gerrymandering across this nation. A lot of these elections are very hard to win, and so I remember back before, right at the beginning of the Trump election or Trump presidency, people were talking about 2018 already, and they said, yeah, but the Democrats are going to have to overcome a lot of gerrymandering. So it's interesting that we've got Pennsylvania dealing with gerrymandering, and we've got this kind of anti-Trump sentiment happening at the same time, because it really feels like a perfect storm for the Democrats to take back the House. But like I said, the Senate may be a different situation. So in order for the Democrats to gain control of the Senate in this next election, they have to win 28 seats.
In the Senate.
In the Senate. And the Republicans only need to win 9 to remain in the majority. Okay?
Wait, hold on.
Yeah. How's that work?
No, I was going to say, because we only elect a third of the Senate at a time.
Exactly. Well, it's a third, or is it? It's every 6 years.
It's staggered. Every 2 years we elect a third of the Senate, and they serve for 6-year terms.
1 second, because I pulled this off of CNN. 1 second. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 seats that are Republican or independents that are up for election, and there are 28 seats that are Democrat or yeah, but that's about a third.
Okay, that works out. Okay.
Yeah, that's about a third.
So it just so happens that this year a disproportionate number of Democrats are up for re-election.
Exactly. So that's why this doesn't. It's not necessarily in their favor. So they have to win all of their elections, and they got to flip one. Okay. So they have. I think they have 27 senators that potentially could lose their seat.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's why this is a much tougher election to win. This is a much tougher branch to win. So a lot of people are saying it's possible, but you're really going to have to ride the anti-Trump sentiment even to get there. Now there's kind of another complication here, and I feel like it's one that people are forgetting about, even though we should know about it. And that is this: the DNC is broke. They got no money. Okay. Like after the Obama election in 2012, the DNC spent everything to win that election. They had nothing. And so Obama didn't really do anything to replenish the war chest. And that's really how we got into the whole Hillary situation. Hillary came in and they signed an agreement to basically merge her campaign fundraising with the DNC funds. And that's why they were so pro-Hillary, is that their success and funding would rise and fall on her success. And so
that's why it was never going to be Bernie.
And that's why it was never going to be Bernie. And so right now in the DNC war chest, they have about $6.3 million, whereas the RNC has $39.8 million. So this election cycle, they are still failing to fundraise. And I don't know if it's because people are still upset about the 2016 election and the how they screwed Bernie. I don't know if it's just because they've forgotten how to go out and fundraise. Like, this is something that the party's not addressing.
Like good old-fashioned mismanagement?
Just good old-fashioned, union mismanagement, man. It's terrible. But so what do they do? Like, how do you solve this problem? Because you're going to need, unfortunately, in the era of Citizens United, which is the case that allowed unlimited money in politics, you can lose an election if you don't have the funds. It's
do they just ride the anti-Trump train? Is that what they do?
I see, and that's the concern, is they have come out like, okay, so this was kind of my next thought. Whenever I went to the primaries here in Texas, I voted in the Democratic primary, and there was a ballot sheet that was specifically platform-based issues. Okay? So they were taking in information from the primary voters on what they thought were important issues to Democrats. And on there, the two issues that I remember specifically kind of standing out as unique or new for this year, this cycle, was Medicare for all, just completely, single-payer system, and dealing with the Dreamers, some type of path to to citizenship for immigrations. So I remember seeing that on there. So the Democrats are trying to create a new platform. And I didn't know this. I looked this up. The platform only is ever updated or re-released every 4 years. So they won't change their platform till 2020. It's still the 2016 platform technically.
Okay.
So I just didn't know that's how parties operated. But I think that they kind of have to do a hybrid. They have to be anti-Trump because that's where the sentiment of the people are. But they need to bring real substance to the table. They need to say how they're going to bring Medicare for all to the table, how they're going to bring a path to citizenship for the Dreamers, how they're going to address Social Security benefits and this ridiculous tax cut that Trump gave to the wealthiest people in America. They need to come with substance. And I still feel like there's kind of a vacuum of leadership in the political arena of the Democrats.
Oh, absolutely. Who's the figurehead now? Elizabeth Warren?
Elizabeth Warren feels like in the Senate, she's definitely... I feel like she's actually leading more than Chuck Schumer personally, but...
Oh, yeah. Nobody likes Chuck Schumer.
He's just been there forever.
Like in the same way that like you say Mitch McConnell and people like make that face that makes them look like Mitch McConnell. They're like, ugh.
Honestly, I really don't like Amy Schumer. Like I just at all. And they're related.
Are they?
They're cousins. There's a picture of them standing together in New York, and it was like a thing for anti-gun violence or the Me Too or something. I remember seeing it. It was like Chuck and Amy Schumer are raising awareness for this issue, and I just was like, I really don't like Amy Schumer.
Like, oh man, I didn't need another reason to dislike her. There, that is.
I just don't. She's got some funny stuff, but most of her humor, I've never found.
Yeah,
funny.
Sorry, Amy, if you're listening.
Sorry if you're listening to this podcast on Sunday morning. But I did find out. So the party is trying to change its strategy. I was reading about I don't know if he's a new DNC chairman or if he just got reelected. But his name is Tom Perez, and he said that the party has aimed to contest every state in the nation in the 2018 election. So,
well, no shit.
They have, no, in Texas, you know how many times I've voted where there wasn't a Democrat running for multiple offices in the state?
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just saying the Democrats have it. And what was the big criticism, the Rust Belt criticism from 2016, is they just didn't even campaign in a lot of those areas. So the Democrats, they dropped the ball in 2016. They've dropped the ball in the past because they say, hey, in red territory, let's just not waste our money. Mm-hmm. Let's just let the Republicans be Republicans and go after the battles that we know we can win. Mm-hmm. And so even though they don't have the money to do this, they're saying, hey, we can't forget anybody anymore. We can't forget the Rust Belt. We can't forget Texas. You know, Texas may become a competitive state. Beto is going for Ted Cruz's seat. There's that one seat they need. If they can hold everything and then flip Ted Cruz's seat, I think actually they need to flip two, but there's a chance. If they flip Ted Cruz and they win everything else, they're back at 50-50 at least.
You want to talk Beto real fast?
I do. Yeah, Beto's a really interesting guy. I listened to a great interview with him on a podcast. It was a while back, but I learned a lot about him. I didn't know he was actually in a punk band. Huh. And he's the state senator from El Paso.
I think he's in the House right now.
Is a state? Okay, House representative member.
No, he's like in Washington, like U.S. Congress.
Is he? I thought he was a state congressman.
No, he's a U.S. Because do you remember when they had that big snowstorm last year, and then that viral video of the two congressmen with the road trip?
I do remember that.
That was him.
I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, he was the Democrat.
That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited that he's going for the House or for the Senate because I really can't stand Ted Cruz. Like nothing. I love the fact that there's an entire Twitter account that was created by Ted Cruz's former college roommate, where all he does is tell terrible stories about Ted Cruz's time in college.
Oh, really?
Yes. No.
I would love to read this.
Oh, it's so good. One of my favorite ones was they had a poker game at the dorm. And Ted Cruz lost all of his money. And so he went and told the RA that they were having an illegal poker game and got everyone in trouble.
Oh,
what a turd. What a turd.
Jeez. You know, we've all known somebody like that.
Everyone's known someone like that. But the fact that this guy has dedicated an entire Twitter account to destroying Ted Cruz's memory, it's fantastic.
I myself have dedicated parts of my personal time to propagating the idea that Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. I love it because it's just so ridiculous.
But you look at him and you're like, yeah, it could happen.
I can see that.
It's those eyes, man. He looks like the grandpa from the Munsters.
He does. He looks exactly like him.
You just add little gray streaks on the side of his head, and it's the same guy.
Yeah, but Beto out from El Paso, I've really liked the way that he's run his campaign so far. In the way that in his appearances, in his speeches, he doesn't mention Ted Cruz, even though everyone else is framing this as, can he unseat Ted Cruz? His message is just, these are the issues. Let's bring Texas together. And I like that.
Well, I do like that. Number one, he's not running an anti-Trump campaign. That's what I was going to bring up about Beto, was that so far he's not saying, send me up there because Trump's an asshole and we need to get this guy out of there. He's not saying we need to impeach this guy. He's in Texas. He knows that maybe some of these people who might vote for him, who are unhappy with Ted Cruz, might have voted for Trump. So he's running an issues campaign, and I think that's what's smart. And as soon as the primary was over, we saw that Ted Cruz was running a smear campaign, making fun of his name, Beto. And old Raphael over there doesn't understand what hypocrisy is. So, apparently that was lost on him.
Yeah.
But I think that is the perfect example of why he has a chance to win. Is he's not running a sleazy campaign. He's not running an anti-Trump campaign, and he's trying to get to the issues that Texans are concerned with. And this brings up another point. We have a lot of farming here in Texas, and I think that if these tariffs continue to escalate in China, it's going to start hitting our farmlands too, not just the stuff in the Midwest.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's another opportunity the Democrats can latch onto and say, hey, look, he doesn't really care about you, rural America. He doesn't really care about you. He's using you as a pawn in a ridiculous game that we don't have to play. So there are more opportunities that are basically being gifted to the Democrats daily.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I get back to it. Does that just mean that they're being anti-Trump,
Because the ideology needs to be thicker than that. It needs to be broader than just reaction to Trump. Because I find myself running afoul of this, where when I see a story about Trump, my immediate reaction, even if I don't know about the issue, is he's wrong.
He's wrong. Yeah,
I oppose this.
He's just like walking down the street, looking at your phone, reading news, and you're just like shouting out, "Oh, bullshit!" Like, haven't even read the article yet.
Right. What's he done now? But I wanted to pose a question to you, and it's that you mentioned earlier that you felt like there was also the same knee-jerk reaction to Obama.
Yes.
So can you trace this back to anybody in particular? Do you think that this started with Obama? Did it start earlier, or is this just how it always is with the president?
Well,
because I would say that we also had the knee jerk to W, where it was whatever W does is wrong.
I definitely had that, but I also was like 15, 16 years old and like started listening to Anti-Flag and was super like anti-Bush. Like I'd be honest, anything Bush did, I was just like, no. I also didn't have a full understanding of U.S. politics in that time. So it was easier just to be anti than to be pro anything. And I think that's kind of the problem, is it's way easier to spread a message of no than it is to spread a message of here's how we solve the problem. And people are much more receptive to something that can fit into a 10-second soundbite than can fit into a 400-page party platform. And I think this is just kind of learning how to address the changing culture. I do think that there's always been that kind of, hey, our faction lost, we hate the other faction, they're just wrong. That I think comes with this factionalized politics that we've had since like the second election in our country. And so I don't think that's changed so much. I think that if you go back, they're saying things like Thomas Jefferson, he's an atheist and he's not a Christian and all that stuff. So you can tell that humans haven't changed a whole lot, just maybe the way they talk has. And I think what's different this time, or at least in my mind, is that you only had to be anti the person, not anything they stood for. And like, because like with W, it was like, hey, waterboarding, hey, 9/11, response, hey, the war in Iraq, hey, Medicare Part D. Like, there were things that I felt like people were pointing out, saying, hey, these are issues that we need that you're doing that we need to address. Cheney's secret black ops government, that whole thing. Lord have mercy. I hope Pence doesn't have a secret black ops government. All right, guys, let's go in.
Oh, jeez. That's not the world I want to live in.
It's not a world I want to live in with Mike Pence black ops. but like Obama, like a lot of the stuff. Remember, I mean, like there's a joke on the internet that like the biggest scandal Obama had was the tan suit, and I know that there was other stuff, but like that's true. There was a whole news segment about a tan suit that Obama wore, you know?
Right. But
And I felt like a lot of the outrage, like it felt manufactured. It was like we have to pick a position because Obama's done something.
Mm-hmm.
And just because Obama's done it, it's bad. Don't forget that Obamacare is really a Republican idea and a compromise. It's bad.
Right.
So, what about you? Do you think that this is the way it's always been? Do you think that this is something new?
I think it's increased. I think it's a little bit of both. That you're exactly right. That whenever anyone is in office, there is an opposition, and it is so much easier to just oppose than to offer an alternative. But maybe this is just what everyone always says, but it feels like the personal attacks against Trump as the individual and the reaction against him, I feel like that's increasing.
Well, I feel like something that has eroded since the Tea Party election. I don't remember this, so I'll be honest, but I don't feel that we had a necessary loss of decorum within the government under W. Okay? Like the ritual, the procedure, the respect for the office, that all continued, even if there was a cultural reversion or, upset or protest to W's presidency.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the rituals were still there. During Obama, that's where I felt like the rituals of the government began to erode, and people abusing the filibuster on everything, and people speaking out during the State of the Union and shouting "You lie," just completely disrespectful to the office of the presidency and to the chamber. And
I don't know.
now,
Before the Civil War, didn't somebody like a senator literally attacked another one with a cane on the floor of the Senate?
yeah, but wasn't there also 150 years between that event and what's happening in Obama's era? I'm just saying, I feel like there is. You're not wrong. Like back in the Civil War, this is things got really bad during that time period. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they seceded from the Union before they even swore in Lincoln. They were like, "Ah, this ain't even happening."
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like there is that ritual, that decorum has been deteriorated and is dying off in this presidency. Trump has no concern for the norm, has no concern for how the president should act. It's just, can I do this? And if I can, then I'm going to do it. If I can't, I'm still going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, do you think that the breakdown of the normal decorum under the Obama administration, do you think that was fueled by racism? Because in the way that Trump has disregarded the normal customs of the government, Obama didn't do that at all. He played the normal president game. So do you think it was racism that caused others to drop the decorum?
I don't think it was racism. I think racism was a utensil or a tool that was used. What it was this. They wanted power back. I honestly believe that the Tea Party and all this stuff, it was a gambit to kind of shift the Republican Party hard to the right. Okay. And it worked. They absorbed the Tea Party in, they shifted hard to the right. The Freedom Caucus is huge. And so they wanted power. How do you get power back from the majority? You have to destroy their credibility. You have to undermine their ability to do their job in the minds of the people who voted for them. And so it was a propaganda war. It was nonstop. That's why every time Obama did anything, he wore a tan suit. They had to say something, and that's why I keep coming back to this. It feels like we're here again. And that's why I'm like, come on, Democrats, you got to be something more than just the party of no and no ideas.
But you've got to admit, the tan suit was pretty terrible.
Honestly, I don't see what the big deal is. Also,
he looked awful in it.
I don't have great taste. So,
no, but I think you're. Yeah, I hope that it's less sinister than just straight up racism. Like I mean, having it be politically motivated and be a propaganda smear campaign really isn't any better, I guess.
No, it isn't. But I think what it was Obama brought the secret racism that America's always had back to the surface.
Yeah.
And he didn't deal with it. he just kind of let it come to the surface and fester. He probably could have done more to try and address that. But honestly, when people are coming at you like the Tea Party was coming at him, it's really hard to be nice. You know, at some point, you just got to ignore him or slap him down. And sometimes he did that. So Trump hasn't made anything better. He's only made things worse. And so until we get someone who's actually going to try and address the racial issues in this country, I don't know. Honestly, it's probably going to take the Supreme Court once again dealing with something to force a cultural change. So I don't know. But it's looking like this election may turn out to be just another referendum on Trump. And let's hope the Democrats don't waste this opportunity.
So are you hoping that the Democrats nationwide will follow Beto's lead?
I think that as the ideologue within me and the belief in the issues, yes, I want them to go to these people and they want them to educate. The one thing that both parties fail to do, and one I feel I'm biased, so I'm going to say this anyways. Honestly, I feel like the Republicans take advantage of this and the Democrats just drop the ball on this, is they don't educate people. They don't educate people. They don't explain it. You know, a lot of times people think that the masses are dumb. And I know that there's a famous quote, Benjamin Franklin, you know, the masses are asses. But you have to explain these issues to these people. The right, the NRA, you know, the Tea Party, they're really good at these one-liner zingers that have no substance, but that they can shout over and over and over again. And unfortunately for the Democrats, a lot of times their response has to be nuanced. It's more complex than that. It's not that simple. And they need to figure out a way to do that in a way that they can explain these issues to these people, explain how, you know, the tariffs are hurting rural America and why Trump doesn't care about them, not just say Trump's a bad guy, he doesn't care about you. And here's how we can solve that. So that's kind of my feelings about the situation.
I mean, I would love to see a issues-based campaign, but
I would love to see it.
I don't see that coming in. It's going to be a while before we ever get back to that.
Let's keep tabs on Beto. So let's see how that turns out, because I am curious, and as I've stated multiple times on my own personal social media, I'm ready to get off the turd Cruz. So
yeah, I'm with you there.
So do you have any weird news this week?
Weird news? Yeah, I got some weird news.
Yeah.
Got some weird news out of the NFL, where a former wide receiver for the New England Patriots by the name of Wes Welker gave an interview where he was asked about whether or not players relieved themselves during the game. And he related a story where linebacker Larry Izzo was awarded the game ball by Coach Bill Belichick for successfully defecating on the sideline without anyone noticing.
Did it explain how?
No, he didn't go into any of the mechanics. Just, you know, I'd love to know how a person in a stadium full of 60,000 people successfully complete such a maneuver, but I'm just impressed. Honestly.
He's just impressed. Hey guys, don't drink the Gatorade. Just trust me. That's baffling. That's just baffling. I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah. Well, there was a famous instance in soccer where Landon Donovan, who's an American soccer player, was caught on camera urinating on the field at the main stadium in Mexico City. And I don't know how much time you spend with sports fans, but a lot of them get real crazy about the playing field. They refer to it as hallowed ground. And that made a lot of people very, very angry, especially because in the photo, it's great. He's just turning, like, he sees the camera and he's grinning at it. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. And he's just like, what's up, man? But in reality, this is normal. Like these are athletes who they've got to drink a lot of water. They've got to take in a lot of fluids, and they're going to have to, you know, eliminate some. And this happens all the time. They're just usually they try to be discreet about it, and just nobody notices. Now, the defecation, however, that's a different matter.
It's a bit much.
That's a little bit much.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I really hope it wasn't in his helmet.
Oh man. Um, when I was in high school, I was in the marching band, and we went to a
You have to
game
take
out in
crap in your hat?
Tyler. What?
You have to take crap in your hat?
No, I
Is that
didn't.
what you're about to tell?
No, this was not me. We we played a football game out in Tyler, which is about 2 hours away, and 3 hours on a school bus because you know
Yeah.
how that goes. And a girl on my bus had to pee, and they weren't gonna stop the bus, so she just relieved herself in her hat box, which is like a plastic container that you put the hat in. And you could smell it for the rest of the ride, and it was
Oh,
horrible.
I hope she took her hat out first.
Oh man, I didn't ask if she did or not.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Well,
So
what was the player's name?
Larry Izzo, I believe.
There he is.
Mhm.
Well, my hat's off to you.
There
Hopefully,
you go.
and helmets too. Hopefully.
Well, what
So,
about you? You got any weird news?
yeah, I want to talk about a potential new continent. Uh, last month in Africa, there was a shift in the tectonic plates. The Nubian plate and the Somali plate in, I think it's East Africa, actually are divergent tectonic plates, which means that they are dividing from each other. They're separating, and they move very, very slow. Geological time, it takes millions of years for these plates to move, except for apparently last month, whenever they're just appeared many 50-foot wide and 50-foot deep cracks across Kenya.
50 foot.
50-foot wide and 50-foot deep, several miles long,
Oh wow.
that were kind of intermittent across Kenya. And the geologists are saying that these plates ultimately will separate and split the continent of Africa in two.
Is that like a millions of years kind of thing?
Yeah, in about 10 million years.
Gotcha.
So it's not like something that's going to happen tomorrow, but also no one expected a 50-foot wide crevice to appear tomorrow. So, as the article said, it was an inverse article. It said that geological time moves slowly, except for when it doesn't. So,
That's great.
I think if you have an opportunity, I think everyone should go look at the pictures because some of them were pretty crazy. Just a massive hole in the middle of a field, and apparently it split like a major highway in two in Nigeria. So
Wow.
they're having some traffic problems too.
Yeah, this reminds me of an article I read when I was a kid about the fault line in California.
Oh yeah,
Because
San Andreas.
yeah, because I think it's a similar situation where, given a long enough time span, Los Angeles is gonna be next to San Francisco. Like that's how it's gonna move.
I don't remember the name of it, but the way that plate is they're sliding plates.
Yeah.
And so one slides up and one slides down.
Right.
And that's the way those work. So yeah, and then like the convergent, which I do remember, is the one where they go like into each other or like one underneath the other, and it creates the mountains. That's like Everest.
Right.
I like geology.
There you go. But I remember reading this article as a kid about the California fault line, and the last sentence of it said something about, eventually the Dodgers and the Giants are going to be crosstown rivals again. Because
Wow.
the Dodgers are in LA, the Giants in San Francisco. Both of them used to play in New York. And I remember reading that and, as like a 6-year-old thinking that would just be the greatest thing, not realizing that it was going to be 20 million years.
Yeah, they didn't give you the context.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
Misleading children's geology materials.
Taking advantage. Now, one last thing. I'm really curious about this. Off the air, you had mentioned that the West doesn't use the most plastics anymore. I'm really curious about that statement. I wanted to ask you about that.
Oh, well, just real quick, I get annoyed at the efforts to reduce plastic use, such as banning plastic straws and such.
Oh my god, I hate
plastic
paper straws.
bags.
Have you had to use a paper straw? They're awful.
I haven't. But in a nutshell, practically all of the plastic that is produced in the West, in the developed world, is collected and disposed of, recycled properly. So efforts to reduce plastic use in the West are really just useless, because what people are worried about is the plastics getting into the environment, getting into the ocean, which that is a problem. I read, I don't know if this is fake news or not, and I hesitate to spread it, but I read that there's a flotilla of styrofoam the size of France in the Caribbean right now. There's also there's a massive whirlpool of plastic in the Pacific where just the natural currents has allowed this collection of massive amounts of plastic. That's a problem. That is a real problem. But you know where all that plastic is coming from? It's coming from China. It's coming from the developing world. They need to do something about it. And I don't mean to say they themselves. We need to help them. But limiting, McDonald's taking the plastic straw out of your cup from your meal in the US, that's not going to do anything for the environment.
Okay, I can understand that now. I will say this. I've seen a lot of articles about ocean cleaning robots and stuff lately where people are trying to address the just massive amounts of litter in our oceans. Mm-hmm. So maybe I agree with you. If China's just dumping all their straws in the ocean after they're done using them, that needs to be addressed. And this is why world organizations are important, and you can try and maybe restrict bad conduct through the World Trade Organization or through the UN, but you actually have to put some teeth behind those organizations.
Right.
But
part of the problem with the plastics in the ocean is that they break down quickly, both from the water and from the sunlight, to the point that it is impossible to then collect them. So there's a lot of plastic going into the ocean and in the ocean right now that we're never going to get back. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to say that this isn't a problem. That's a problem. But banning plastic bags in Dallas from grocery stores, that's not going to do anything.
That straight up lasted 1 month. I remember they did that, and it was a week later or a month later, they were all back. And I asked the guy at the 7-Eleven, I was like, what happened? He's like, everybody was pissed they took away the bags.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll admit they're an eyesore when they get caught in the trees and the creeks and things. Yeah, that's annoying, but that's all it is. It's an eyesore. It's not really having a meaningful effect on our ecosystem.
Well, as long as we clean it up.
As long as we clean it up, which is what we do. So we do need to expand recycling projects. One of the reasons why this is a problem is that starting this year, 2018, China has stopped taking international imports of recycled plastic. They used to be the world leader. I think they used to recycle about 50% of the rest of the world's plastic, but now they have stopped that. So the rest of the world now has to figure out what they're going to do with it. The answer is recycle it, but that's going to take some time and some investment.
Build houses for the homeless. I don't know. Do something. We got a bunch of wasted resources.
Yeah, exactly. But that's enough of my rant on plastic.
No, I just was curious about that because you mentioned it and I had forgot about it.
Yeah.
Well, you ready to go south and go down to Brazil?
Yeah, man. Let's take a trip south.
They speak Portuguese, right? There.
They do. They speak Portuguese, being a former Portuguese colony. Fun geographic fact: they are the only country to ever have a European empire move its capital to the New World.
Really?
Yeah, because briefly, I think because of a coup, the Portuguese royal family moved the capital of the Portuguese Empire to Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And if you ever get the chance to visit, it's a beautiful country full of lovely people. It's got a lot of problems.
And a lot of plastic surgery.
They are not nearly as waxed as the media would have you believe.
You say they're very hairy people?
No, I was expecting no one to have any hair on their back. I thought that I was under the impression, I was led to believe by shows like An Idiot Abroad, that everybody just goes for a weekly waxing appointment in Brazil and nobody has any body hair showing. No, that is not the case. The skimpy bathing suits, that definitely is the case. But the lack of body hair is not. There's a lot of body hair, and I don't mean to throw any shade on them. I very much felt at home.
That's interesting. Anyway. It goes to show you that media affects our perception.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to talk about the political situation down there right now. It's been pretty turbulent, pretty much forever, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But particularly lately, because we had some very dramatic scenes over the weekend of former president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who's normally just known as Lula. Lula was holed up in a metal workers union building because he was supposed to turn himself in to start serving a prison sentence for corruption. And he initially had refused to turn himself over because he is pleading his innocence. There were some dramatic scenes where his supporters then surrounded the building and encamped there. And when he decided that he actually was going to surrender to the authorities, his supporters surrounded his car to try and prevent him from turning himself in. So crazy stuff.
Well, it sounds insane.
Yeah. So I guess to real quick, the current situation, he has turned himself in, and it looks like he's going to start serving his prison sentence. So,
But is he also running for president? Is that what you said?
oh yes, he's
From prison.
Well, that's the problem.
Okay.
The Brazil's going to vote for their president, I believe, in October of this year, so they're gearing up for the campaign. Lula was president from 2003 to 2011, and he was looking to return to office. And he claims that this current prosecution is politically motivated to prevent him from being elected again.
So this is really interesting, and you continue.
Well, I want to give some background. Say,
Okay, yeah.
So who is Lula? Why is he important, and why is he trying to run again?
Mm-hmm.
So Lula was a founding member of the Brazilian Workers' Party, which some people refer to just straight up as the Communist Party. I'm not an expert, but they don't really have any sort of Marxist revolutionary bent. They're really just they just seem to be a straight up workers' party. So he's a founder of the Workers' Party, which is a leftist organization in a country that has historically, politically been very much to the right. They were under military dictatorship for most of the 20th century. And when Lula was able to win the presidency in 2003, that was a big win for the left in South America. That we talked a little bit about the pink tide last week with Chavez and the Kirchners and such, and some view Lula as part of that, but his ideology is very much socialism light.
That's what it sounded like, more like a union workers' party, a labor party, as opposed to a full-on socialism party.
Right. I'm sure there are experts who could probably explain this better, but he was uniquely successful in bringing together the interests of both the private business and the labor unions, and he was successful in finding common ground between them.
Okay.
But some argue that part of his success, as we talked about last week, was due to the commodities boom, where the economy of Brazil boomed in the aughts. They were able to fund a lot of social programs that helped out the poor and the disenfranchised. So he's very, very popular amongst the lower classes, the working people, the proletariat. He's very, very popular with these people.
And you said he wasn't that Marxian.
Right. I guess whenever you use the word proletariat, that's...
Yeah, when you use the word proletariat, you're kind of like right in Marx's wheelhouse.
That's where I'm going. Well, I mean, their imagery is it borrows a lot with using the color red and stars, and I think they might even have hammers and sickles. So, you can understand why people.
I can understand why they call him the communist. Yeah.
So he's very popular. Serves from 2003 to 2011. He's then succeeded by his hand-picked deputy, Dilma Rousseff, who was then impeached in 2016 due to corruption charges. So this is all tied back to that Lava Jato corruption investigation, where investigators have uncovered evidence of massive corruption across South America, particularly in Brazil, stemming from Odebrecht, which is a construction firm, as well as Petrobras, which is the government-owned oil company in Brazil, where basically they found evidence that politicians received kickbacks in return for awarding overinflated public works contracts to these private companies. Just classic corruption.
Just classic corruption. It seems like no one has an original idea anymore.
Right. And it's referred to as the Lava Jato scandal. That means car wash, because the evidence showed that a number of these politicians were laundering their money basically through a gas station in Sao Paulo. Like I could be mixing this up, but they were basically using things like Western Union from a gas station to launder their bribes, which I love that. I think that's just ridiculous. So how does Lula factor in here? Well, Lula is accused of, after leaving office, receiving $1 million apartment from one of these dirty businesses. He claims that he never occupied nor owned the apartment, that these charges are trumped up, that they're fake, that he never did anything wrong. It appears that the evidence says otherwise, but he's been convicted of just one count of 9 relating to the apartment.
Was he convicted in absentia? Because I thought he was holed up somewhere.
The conviction, I don't know if it was a year ago or more, but the conviction is settled. Okay. The problem now is that what Lula was arguing was that he should not have to be he shouldn't have to surrender into custody until all of his appeals have been settled.
Oh.
So he's appealing the decision. And his lawyers were arguing that he shouldn't have to turn himself in yet. And I was reading that there actually might even be up to 3 levels of appeal for this particular conviction.
Interesting.
So this appeal could go on for years, maybe decades. But the reason why he was holed up is that his argument that he shouldn't have to turn himself in was rejected, and the appeals court ruled that he would have to turn himself into custody. So the question of whether or not he will be allowed to run in the presidential election is still unsettled. I think the consensus is sort of, is he in jail or not? If he's not, then he can run. If he is, then he can't.
So this is interesting because I just happened to run across an article that was talking about the up-and-coming religious evangelicals in Brazil and how they may be the ones who choose the outcome of this election.
Really? And evangelicals?
Yes. So historically, Brazil, very Catholic, as most of South America has been. But from about 2000 forward, American evangelicals, such as the Pentecostals and just like generic non-denominational churches, have been aggressively pushing evangelism in South America, and specifically in Brazil. And the evangelical non-denominational church is one of the fastest growing churches in South America. And so this very conservative, very, emotional kind of sects of Christianity here, and they're getting ground very fast. And so they were kind of interviewing some pastors from I think Sao Paulo, and they were saying, like, we need to make sure that we pick someone who represents our ideals and stuff like that. The general stuff that we hear any kind of conservative religious people talking about. So they were saying that because of this new group coming in, that they may have a lot more say on who the conservative candidates are ultimately, or what their platforms are, because of this new kind of shifting religious culture.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
On one level, I am relieved to hear that another country's political process is being co-opted by radical
Religious
religious
people.
figures. And on the other hand, I feel bad for Brazil because like that's not good.
Well, it tends to happen, you know. I mean, even some of the conservative populism happening across the EU and Europe, some of it has some religious undertones and kind of like weird nationalism stuff. I just don't understand this movement personally, but I just like to throw this out here. I still don't understand how Poland could vote to say that no one can say that they were involved in the Holocaust. Like,
yeah, right.
Just don't understand how that works. But
exactly.
So ultimately, do you know who else is running in this election? Because I didn't actually pick up any other candidates other than who you were talking about.
You know, that I have not looked into. The current president of Brazil is a member of the opposition party. Because they've got a system where when the president is removed, the vice president moves up. You know, imagine that.
Yeah.
But the vice president, it's kind of like how we elected our vice president at the beginning.
The loser gets the vice presidency.
Runner up gets vice presidency. So because they impeached the president, now the opposition now holds the presidency, and the current president of Brazil is one of the most unpopular leaders in the world. I think he's got to run a 10% approval rating. He's also been implicated in the corruption scandal, but it looks like he's been able to avoid any sort of consequences so far. The one thing that I know about him is that I think he's in his 70s or his 80s, and his wife is 43 years younger than he is.
No.
They met when she was 19, and apparently she was just absolutely smitten with him. Has his name tattooed across her neck, and John Oliver read on his show some of the poetry that the president wrote about his muse, his young wife, and it was creepy. It was creepy.
Was it in I guess it'd be Portuguese. I was gonna say it was in Spanish, but I don't know. That's to each their own. Whatever. I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Is it? My question is: did he have money and power by the time they got married, or was he just like some guy and came to power later?
I think he was like the finance minister, something like that. But the political process in Brazil is very interesting. It's very turbulent, and in South America, they have a very interesting method of protest where people literally just go outside onto their balconies or out into the street and bang pots for hours on end. And it just causes this cacophony throughout the city that is impossible to ignore.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and when I was visiting, it was actually just before they impeached Rousseff in 2016.
So that was happening a lot.
Yeah, and driving through Sao Paulo, we were going down the main street, Avenida Paulista, and there was the protest going on. There were people just banging drums in the median of the street and waving the Brazilian flag, because that's been kind of the symbol of the opposition. Is just people have been just using the national flag. Where I mentioned that the supporters of Lula had surrounded him at his headquarters. There was an opposition protest where the people calling for him to turn himself over, calling him a thief, they then had their protest at the police station he was supposed to turn himself in at, which I thought was an interesting choice. But I'm interested to see where this goes. They've got an election coming up in October. I think we should probably come. I imagine we'll probably come back and revisit it. Something else that I want to look forward to in the future as well is that Mexico is also having a presidential election, I believe, first week of July.
Oh, wow.
And they've got themselves a populist candidate who's almost like a mirror image to Trump, where he's Mexican and on the left. And he's got a lot of very interesting ideas, so I'm looking forward to getting into that a little bit later.
So, you know, what he could say is, I'm going to get America to build a wall, and I'm going to get them to pay for it. And that way, if Trump actually gets his wall, he can say that he got his wall.
Genius.
It's genius politics.
Genius.
Of course, I don't think any Mexicans want a wall, so.
Yeah. I don't think I was about to say I don't think anybody wants a wall, but clearly
I
some
agree.
people do.
I don't think anybody wants a wall, but I know that Mexico definitely doesn't want to pay for it.
Oh yeah, I don't think anybody who actually lives near the wall wants a wall. But
I love the fact that Cards Against Humanity bought up a bunch of like property along the border and then like put a bunch of money in like lawyer trust funds and hired them to fight that the eminent domain cases that will be coming inevitably if they do get their wall.
huh, interesting.
Yeah, just throwing, some sand in the machine just because.
Huh. Well, before we wrap up, you want to check the mailbag and see if we have any viewer questions?
As Pee Wee Herman said, mailbag.
Yeah. So shout out to our listeners. If you want to ask us a question, any arbitrary and capricious questions that you have, you can email us at arbitrarycapriciouspodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us. We're on Twitter at ArbCapPodcast. You can also use the hashtag to talk about us online. You can use hashtag ArbCapPod. That's ARBCAPPOD. So let's check this mailbag. All right. We've got one question this week. This one's for Aaron.
Okay.
They're asking, what's your favorite ethnic food?
Well, I would have to say, first of all, are we allowed to say ethnic food? And second of all, probably, man, this is a tough. I'm gonna go with Indian. Like, I don't have it enough, but I absolutely love Indian food. Like, I love curry. I love naan. I love the meats and sauces and the weird salads that don't look like salad at all. I love the mixture of flavors. I would not want to personally cook curry because it's really hard to get rid of that smell after you do.
Oh, that's true.
But definitely going out and eating it, that's one of my favorites.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Really? Okay. Let's get
it. I never knew that you liked Indian food before.
We went down to downtown Dallas to Deep Ellum one night, and there was a restaurant, and I think it's called like the Fire Brick Pizzeria or something like that in Deep Ellum. I can't remember exactly, but they had a chicken tikka marsala pizza, and it was just phenomenal. And that's like the last time I've been able to have any Indian food.
Interesting.
It was like quasi Indian food.
Well, my dad likes Indian food a lot, and but whenever he wants to go out for Indian food, he always wants to go out for like a buffet.
Yeah,
that's just the kind of guy he is.
But that's the way you do Indian food. It's like you get a little of the red, a little of the green, some of the yellow, and some bread.
That's true. I love the naan.
Naan,
so good.
Toasted buttered naan.
Oh.
And then there's this dessert in Indian food. It's called gulab jamun.
Yeah,
and it's like little pancake balls, and it's like covered in syrup. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I do enjoy that.
What about you, Jay? What's your favorite ethnic food? If you say like Brazilian or South American, like staying really getting one trick pony.
Well, my go-to, my knee-jerk reaction is Mexican. I love Mexican food. I guess maybe more accurately you could say it's Tex-Mex.
Yeah,
because I love enchiladas. I love fajitas. I love a good michelada.
I want to just real fast, kind of just sidebar. Tacos are not Tex-Mex. They were created by Mexican miners in the 1800s. I didn't know that, and people always refer to tacos as Tex-Mex. They are traditional Mexican food.
Now, your stereotypical hard shell taco?
That's Taco Bell.
That's straight up American. Yeah. Pretty much rule of thumb, if it's got cheese, sour cream on it, that's not actual Mexican. But not to say that hard shell tacos are not delicious.
That's also true.
But that's my go-to. But lately, I have been just really, really enjoying Mediterranean food. I don't know what it is, but tabbouleh lately has just been my jam.
I think tabbouleh is like some type of dish. That's what it is.
What?
You said tabbouleh. I don't know what it is.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I know. Well, I love phrase that well. I love Mediterranean. Isn't tabbouleh the stuff? No, what's the grape, the grape leaf wrap thing?
Oh, that is dolmas.
Dolma. Oh, I don't like dolma.
I love dolmas. No, tabbouleh is like a salad. It's chopped up parsley and tomatoes and onions.
I know what that is now.
It's so fresh and so clean.
You like
So
the baba
fresh and so
ganoush?
clean. I love baba ganoush. It's got, especially when it's got a nice smoky flavor to it. You and I had some really good Mediterranean food recently. I think went to a place in Richardson.
Oh yeah, we
They
went to
was that Afra?
Afra's. Yeah, no,
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
that baba ganoush there was great.
I will say this: I don't think of Mediterranean food as ethnic food because I eat it so often. Like it's just become like normal for me. Like I go and get gyro like on a pretty regular basis.
Mhm.
But I have to give an honorable mention because any situation if someone's like, "Hey, do you want to go get a euro?" I'm like, "Of course I do." I'm not gonna turn that down.
Oh no, yeah, I'm never gonna turn down a euro.
Ugh. That was
But
one thing being in the Mediterranean in Israel, like having euro meat at any stop. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about traveling, especially going to Europe, is that they've definitely had a proliferation of kebabs throughout. Where pretty much anywhere you go in Europe, you can get a kebab, and it's delicious. It's so unhealthy. It's dripping with fat. It's chock full of salt, but it's so good.
I wish we had more kebab places, but also I don't know of any kebab places around here that are specifically kebabs.
Well, we did have Verts, who the reason it's called Verts is that they had the vertical grill with the
Kebab.
the kebab thing. But they've recently retooled, and now it's called Noon, and I think they're trying to go healthier. And they've gotten rid of the vertical grill, and I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah.
But to quickly be the PC police, two terms I find that we've just used, which I find very funny, are ethnic food and Mediterranean food.
Yeah.
With the Mediterranean one, like, who are we kidding? Like, it's usually either Palestinian, Arab, or Iranian, but no one is going to open up a restaurant in Plano, Texas, selling Palestinian food.
Okay, so you're saying the people running it are generally Iranian or Palestinian or something like that. But they stick with the Mediterranean Greek kind of mentality because that's a little bit more palatable to the Americans.
Yeah, that's why they call it Mediterranean.
See, when we went to Colorado, we went to a Syrian restaurant. Remember that? It said it was a Syrian cafe, and at the end we were like, "It's just Mediterranean food." Like there wasn't anything different on the menu.
Right, and I applaud.
You applaud them for advertising their Syrian heritage.
I guess I don't want to throw shade on the people who market themselves as Mediterranean. I'm saying that is savvy. I think that's smart.
It is a really broad categorization that generally refers to anything that's like gyros and falafel and a lot of the olive-based mixtures. So it's that food is eaten in all those regional areas.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Calling it Mediterranean food is correct. That is the food that is eaten around the Eastern Mediterranean.
But I do agree, like the Greek restaurant actually was a Greek restaurant. It was run by like people from, wasn't Libya. What's the other one? Where's Beirut?
Lebanon.
They were from Lebanon.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to go to a Lebanese restaurant. Or generally, I'm not thinking about it.
That's the one exception, is that I have seen a few Lebanese restaurants around DFW. There's a Lebanese bakery just down the street from where I live. And I've always kind of wondered why. Why is it that we're cool with Lebanon, but we're not cool with Jordan or Syria or Egyptian restaurants?
I don't know. I haven't actually really thought about that. I will say that some Mediterranean places like Sanibel and Addison have more of an Arabic feel. Afra's has more of an Arabic feel.
Oh yeah.
So they're not afraid of going that route and having kind of a theme and still calling it Mediterranean. But I definitely know that like the Flame and Cheese, which is one of my favorite Greek restaurants.
Oh yeah.
It's got like a picture, like a mural of like a Greece, like alleyways and the ocean and stuff on the walls, and it's like kind of a little quaint restaurant. And like everyone who works there, none of them are Greek, So
yeah, right.
It's all in on the Greek theme.
Oh yeah, like every Italian restaurant in DFW is run by Albanians, and the food is great. Like they run a great Italian restaurant. But when you talk to them, they're usually from the Balkans. There's one near my house that my family has kind of gotten to know the owners, and they have amazing stories of coming to this country after the wars in the 90s with nothing and building building a business out of nothing. And this one in particular, it's Joe's Pizza and Pasta in Plano on Spring Creek. They then do a lot of outreach with the community and feeding the homeless to give back, because
awesome.
They were once in that situation themselves. And I just want to give them a shout out for being good people.
That's awesome. But I do want to say this entire discussion, like, and maybe we need to add a counter how many times we reference fresh off the boat on this podcast, yeah. Because it's all I can think of is the Chinese family running a like cowboy kitchen. Yes. You know, it's so interesting to me whenever you see someone who like, and maybe this is just our white American like stereotypes having to be unlearned. But it's just weird to see someone who's running a restaurant that's very different from where they're from, you know?
And this is probably not PC, but
it's probably not PC. We're talking about it though.
The joke in my friends growing up is that like the door to the Chinese restaurant opens, or the door to the kitchen opens, and it's all Hispanic men cooking the food at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever I was going to college, there was a Taco Bell and a KFC like across the street. Yes. And everyone that worked at the Taco Bell was African American, and everyone that worked at the KFC was Hispanic. Right. And I just was like, this is interesting, because you would expect to kind of be different. You expect the Hispanic people working at Taco Bell. I don't know. And I'm like, well, that just means I'm racist, I guess. So I had to kind of stop thinking that way. You know, when I was going to school, I was like, well, I now realize that living in white suburbia, I have conceptions and perceptions that are probably incorrect. And I had to kind of change the way I was thinking back then. Yeah. And honestly, as we're now sitting here talking about, you know, Arabs having Greek restaurants, it hasn't changed that much. It's still something that I find curious.
Oh yeah, and I went to a Mexican restaurant in Madrid, and
it was a Mexican restaurant in Spain.
Oh yeah, I mean they have Mexican restaurants everywhere. They're not as proliferative as they are here in Texas, of course. That's not. It's more of a niche thing, but like I went there, and you look into the kitchen, and all of the cooks were Asian. So I think it's just like immigrant labor is gonna fill your unskilled labor force.
I was about to say, I was like, is this just that multiculturalism and immigration, they tend to take the jobs down at the bottom, the service jobs that,
oh yeah, exactly,
like, you know, other parts of the society, the jobs that the white people won't take as yeah, it's always like, referred to.
There's no reason that African Americans can't work at Taco Bell. There's no reason that Latinos can't work at KFC or anywhere else that they want to, because guess what, they can do a job just as well as you can.
Absolutely. And it gets back to just unlearning stereotypes and things that have been ingrained in our culture for so long.
It's true.
It's a process, and this goes to show you why things don't move fast. Is it takes time. I remember growing up, and my grandparents live in the South. They have, you know, farmland down there, and they would say things that would not be acceptable in polite society today, you know, and I'm like, whoa, grandparents, that's not appropriate.
Oh yeah.
And you know, everyone has that story about some family member or someone who's said something that's not appropriate. You know,
when I broke the news to a friend of mine's grandmother that Hamilton consisted of a multicultural cast rapping,
yeah,
he was devastated. And I wanted to be like, wait, like you were so amped and like excited about this play because it was like historical, but you clearly never like knew anything about it or like listened to the soundtrack or anything. Like how could you not popular know? Yeah, like how could you not know? But it was her face when we were like, no, it's, you know, it's minority actors, and it's most of it is hip hop. And
it's like, I mean, remember whenever they, and I don't say remember because I don't necessarily remember this, but didn't they do like Othello and they flipped everything to where like it was one white guy and all black people?
Yeah.
So it's not like that's out of the norm to flip things around. But
oh yeah.
I think it's an interesting idea. I just still don't know anything about Hamilton other than it's just been wildly popular.
Yeah, the one thing I know about Hamilton is that I'm sick of hearing about Hamilton, so I don't know why I brought it up. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, shame on you.
My bad. Well, now that we've talked about race relations, you want to call it a day for this pod?
Absolutely. So we've already had our social media. Please, if you guys have any questions, send them. We love to talk about them and kind of go off the rails a little bit. But this has been a great podcast. Hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful day. But I think that's it for me. What about you, Jay?
That's all I got. I just want to say thank you to our listeners, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Next Sunday it is. Signing off.